Namo Namo Buddha Divakaraya, Namo Namo Gautama Chandrikaya, Namo Namo Ananta Gunanaraya, Namo Namo Shakya Nandanaya. I offer my salutations to the Buddha, the sun. I offer my salutations, the moon of Gautama lineage. I offer my salutations to the great soul who has been endowed with infinite merit. I offer my salutations to the prince of Shakya dynasty. Dear friends, today my topic is life and teachings of Buddha. Many of you perhaps know that tomorrow thousands of followers of Buddha across the world, especially in the birthplace of him, India and Nepal, are going to celebrate Buddha Purnima, the full moon day of the month of Vaishakha, the day of his birth, his glorious enlightenment, and Mahaparinirvana, the final departure. Keeping in mind this most significant day of Buddha's life, today we will take the opportunity to meditate upon him. But before we say something on Buddha, I like to present a story of Fuji, a poor fisherman, a devotee of Buddha, who came from Japan to Bodh Gaya, a remote village, now a town in India. We first got Fuji's name while reading the life of Sister Nivedita, the great disciple of Swami Shivarchanananda. In 1904, October, Sister Nivedita went for a week to Bodh Gaya. It was her third visit. This time, her party included Dr. J.C. Bose, the great scientist, Rabindranath Tagore, the great poet, Swami Shivarchanananda, a distinguished monk of Ramakrishna order, Sir Jadunath Sarkar, a famous historian, and Mr. Mathuranath Sinha, a gentleman from Patna. They were all lodged in a guest house. From the recollections of Sir Jadunath Sarkar and some other members of the party, we come to know how this group of prominent men passed their time with Nivedita. In this place of pilgrimage, recapturing the spirit of the past. Here, there were daily readings by Nivedita from Warren Hastings' Buddhism and occasionally from Edwin Arnold's famous book, Light of Asia. Nivedita's deep and varied tone always revealed how the subject of Buddha's life and work possessed her. Sometimes songs and recitations by the poet Rabindranath enthralled them. During the day, they strolled through the temple enclosure or visited the neighboring villages. In the evening twilight, they went to the Bodhi tree and sat in silent meditation. Here they found Fuji, a poor Japanese fisherman who had by hard austerity for many years saved money to gratify his life's dream of making a pilgrimage to the spot where Buddha had attained enlightenment. He had at last come here and lived in a room of the pilgrim's house. Every evening he would come and sit under the Bodhi tree, praying and chanting this hymn, with which we have started today's talk. Namo Namo Buddha Divakaraya, Namo Namo Gautama Chandrikaya, Namo Namo Ananta Gunanaraya, Namo Namo Shakya Nandanaya. In the silence, The sound of the words of the hymn, uttered with a Japanese accent, rose like the tolling of a low bell, and it made them feel as if they were overpowered by the spirit of the place. The story of Fuji left a deep impression on all of them. He had got a place in the literary works of Rabindranath and of Sir Jodunath. It feels really good to think about how a poor man catching fish on the coast of the Pacific Ocean, propelled by an unknown emotional tide, ignoring the hardship of daily life, sailed a long way to India from Japan. What was the exact nature of that emotional tide, or how it arose in his mind, we don't know. Perhaps the infinite ocean whispered something in his ears and heart. Buddha once said, "My doctrine is like the ocean, having the same 8 wonderful qualities. Both the ocean and my doctrine become gradually deeper. Both preserve their identity under all changes. Both cast out dead bodies upon the dry land as the great rivers, when falling into the main, lose their names and are thenceforth reckoned as the great ocean. So all the castes, having renounced their lineage and entered the Sangha, become brethren and are reckoned the sons of Shakya Muni. The ocean is the goal of all streams and of the rain from the clouds. Yet is it never overflowing and never emptied. So the Dharma is embraced by many millions of people, yet it neither increases nor decreases. As the great ocean has only one taste, the taste of salt, so my doctrine has only one flavor, the flavor of emancipation. Both the ocean and the Dharma are full of gems and pearls and jewels, and both afford a dwelling place for mighty beings. These are the 8 wonderful qualities in which my doctrine resembles the ocean. My doctrine is pure, and it makes no discrimination between noble and ignoble, rich and poor. My doctrine is like unto water, which cleanses all without distinction. Swami Vivekananda, the New Age Buddha, also noticed all embracing compassion and spoke about it many times whenever he got a chance. In Swami Vivekananda's language, Buddha was the great preacher of equality. Every man and woman has the same right to attain spirituality. That was his teaching. The difference between the priests and the other castes he abolished. Even the lowest were entitled to the highest attainments. He opened the door of nirvana to one and all. His heart was large. Then Swamiji pointed out the most practical thing. His heart was large. The heart many around us may have, and we also want to help others, but we do not have the brain. We do not know the ways and means by which help can be given. But this man had the brain to discover the means of breaking the bondages of souls. He learned why men suffer, and he found the way out of suffering. He was a man of accomplishment. He worked everything out. Yes, he worked everything out by his own effort. Tremendous was his resolution. When he left the palace of his forefathers, it was clear to him that in this world what was transitory and what was real. There is a beautiful conversation between the king of Magadha, Bimbisara, and Buddha. Of course, they are known as Siddhartha or Gautama. This conversation, better to say, a sweet confrontation, reflects the clarity of thought and immense determination of this young, brilliant seeker of truth. Let us try to visualize that scene as it unfolded in the kingdom of Magadha. After leaving the territory of Sakyas, Siddhartha entered into Magadha. He already had cut his hair and wore the clothes of a monk. He walked alone on the high road with a beggar's bowl in his hand, yet the majesty of his mind was ill concealed under the poverty of his appearance. His erect gait betrayed his royal birth, and his eyes beamed with zeal for truth. All the people who saw this unusual sight gazed at him in wonder. Those who were in haste arrested their steps and looked back, and there was no one who did not pay him homage. Having entered the city of Rajagriha, Gautama went from house to house, silently waiting till the people offered him food. Wherever he came, the people gave him what they had. They bowed before him in humility and were filled with gratitude. Old and young people were moved and said, "This is a noble Muni. His approach is bliss. What a great joy for us." I should say in this connection, in a broader sense, monk, Muni, Shramana, these words mean the same thing. And again, another thing I would like to say that we find that in Buddhist literature, Buddha is called by various names like Tathagata, Bodhisattva, Shakya Muni, etc. It is just like as out of affection we call our dear ones with different names. Anyhow, when the King Bimbisara noticed this commotion in the city, inquired the cause of it, and sent one of his attendants to observe the stranger. Having heard that the Muni must be a Shakya and of noble family, and that he had returned to the bank of a flowing river in the woods to eat the food in his bowl, the king was moved in his heart. He donned his royal robe, placed his golden crown upon his head, and went out in the company of aged and wise counselors to meet this mysterious guest. The king found the young monk seated under a tree, contemplating the composure of his face and the gentleness of his deportment. Bimbisara greeted him reverently and said, "O Shramana, your hands are fit to grasp the reins of an empire and should not hold a beggar's bowl. I am sorry to see you wasting your youth. Believing that you are of royal descent, I invite you to join me in the government of my country and share my royal power. To grow rich and lose religion is not true gain, but he who possesses all three, power, wealth, and religion, enjoying them in discretion and with wisdom, him I call a great master." The great soul, Siddhartha, the Shakya Muni, hearing these words of the king, lifted his eyes and replied, "You are known, O king, to be liberal and religious, and your words are prudent. A kind man who makes good use of wealth is rightly said to possess a great treasure, but the miser who hoards up his riches will have no profit. I have severed all ties because I seek deliverance. How is it possible for me to return to the world? Better than sovereignty over the earth Better than living in heaven, better than lordship over all worlds is the fruit of holiness. I have recognized the illusory nature of wealth and will not take poison as food. Will a fish that has been baited still covet the hook? Or an escaped bird love the net? Would a rabbit rescued from the serpent's mouth go back to be devoured? Would a man who has burnt his hand with a torch take up the torch after he had dropped it to the earth? Would a blind man who has recovered his sight desire to spoil his eyes again? The sick man suffering from fever seeks for a cooling medicine. Shall we advise him to drink that which will increase the fever? Shall we quench a fire by heaping fuel upon it? I pray thee, pity me not. Rather pity those who are burdened with the cares of royalty and the worry of great riches. They enjoy them in fear and trembling, for they are constantly threatened with the loss of those boons on whose possession their hearts are set. My heart hankers after no vulgar profit, so I have put away my royal inheritance and prefer to be free from the burdens of life. Therefore, try not to entangle me in new relationships and duties, nor hinder me from completing the work I have begun. I regret to leave you, but I will go to the sages who can teach me religion and so find the path on which we can escape evil. May your country enjoy peace and prosperity, and may wisdom be shed upon your rule like the brightness of the noonday sun. May your royal power be strong, and may righteousness be the scepter in thine hand. The king, clasping his hands with reverence, bowed down before Shakya Muni and said, May you obtain that which you seek, and when you have obtained it, come back, I pray you, and receive me as your disciple. The Bodhisattva parted from the king in friendship and goodwill, and with an intention in his heart to grant his request. Thus the journey began, and how he got his ever-desired goal, more or less you know. He went to pay homage to the teachers who were renowned in those days for their learning and philosophical knowledge, and he sat at their feet. He listened to their doctrines. He learned their views of the self and of the law of karma. But he found no satisfaction in these teachings. Then he himself meditated deeply on the problems of transmigration and karma and found that the truth that lies in them. Leaving that place in search of better system, he came to a settlement of 5 bhikshus, that is monks, in the jungle of Uruvela of Bihar. Living with holy zeal and a strong heart, this great soul gave himself up to meditative thought and rigorous mortification of the body. He continued for 6 years patiently, torturing himself and ignoring the wants of nature. He trained his body and exercised his mind in the modes of the most rigorous ascetic life. As a result, he was shrunken and attenuated, and his body was like a withered branch. But the fame of his holiness spread in the surrounding countries, and people came from great distances to see him and receive his blessings. However, he was not satisfied. Seeking true wisdom, he did not find it, and he came to the conclusion that mortification would not extinguish desire nor afford enlightenment in ecstatic contemplation. Seated beneath a jambu tree, he considered the state of his mind and the fruits of his mortification. His body had to become weaker, nor had his fasts advanced him in his search for salvation. And therefore, when he saw that it was not the right path, he proposed to abandon it. He discovered the middle path. He went to bathe in the Niranjana river. He took some of the food he had received by chance and gave himself up to meditation. In that great meditation, all miseries of the world, the evils produced by evil deeds, and the sufferings arising therefrom passed before his mental eye, and he thought, surely, if living creatures saw the results of all their evil deeds, they would turn away from them in disgust. But selfhood binds them, and they cling to their obnoxious desires. Pondering on the origin of birth and death, the enlightened one recognized that ignorance was the root of all evil. And these are the links in the development of life called the 12 Nidanas, a technical Buddhist term. In the beginning, there is existence, blind and without knowledge, and in this sea of ignorance, there are appetences, means a longing or desire, formative and organizing. From appetences, formative and organizing, rises awareness or feelings. Feelings beget organisms that live as individual beings. These organisms develop the 6 fields, that is Sharayatana, that is the 5 senses and the mind. The 6 fields come in contact with things. Contact begins sensation. Sensation creates the thirst of individualized being. The thirst of being creates a cleaving to things. The cleaving produces the growth and continuation of selfhood. Selfhood continues in renewed births. The renewed births of selfhood are the cause of suffering, old age, sickness, and death. They produce lamentation, anxiety, and despair. The cause of all sorrow lies at the very beginning. It is hidden in the ignorance from which life grows. The enlightened one saw the 4 noble truths, which point out the path that leads to nirvana or the extinction of self. The first noble truth is the existence of sorrow. Birth is sorrowful, growth is sorrowful, illness is sorrowful, and death is sorrowful. Sad it is to be joined with that which we do not like. Sadder still is the separation from that which we love. And painful is the craving for that which cannot be obtained. The second noble truth is the cause of suffering. The cause of suffering is lust. The surrounding world affects sensation and begets a craving thirst, which clamors for immediate satisfaction. The illusion of self originates and manifests itself in a cleaving to things. The desire to live for the enjoyment of self entangles us in the net of sorrow. Pleasures are the bait, and the result is pain. The third noble truth is the cessation of sorrow. He who conquers self will be free from lust. He no longer craves, and the flame of desire finds no material to feed upon. Thus, it will be extinguished. The fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path that leads to the cessation of sorrow. There is salvation for him whose self disappears before truth, whose will is bent upon what he ought to do, whose sole desire is the performance of his duty. He who is wise will enter this path and make an end of sorrow. The Eightfold Path is 1. Right comprehension, 2. Right resolutions, 3. Right speech, 4. Right acts, 5. Right way of earning a livelihood, 6. Right efforts, 7. Right thoughts, and 8. The right state of peaceful mind. This is the Dharma, this is the truth, this is religion. The Blessed One stayed in solitude for 49 days, enjoying the bliss of emancipation. He thought, I have recognized the deepest truth, which is sublime and peace-giving, but difficult to understand. For most men move in a sphere of worldly interests and find their delight in worldly desires. The worldling will not understand the doctrine, for to him there is happiness in selfhood only, and the bliss that lies in a complete surrender to truth is unintelligible to him. Should I preach the doctrine and mankind not comprehend it? It would bring me only fatigue and trouble. But again, this great soul, the awakened one, with full of compassion, looked with the eye of a Buddha upon all sentient creatures, and he saw among them there are some beings that are almost free from the dust of worldliness. If they hear not the doctrine preached, they will be lost. But if they hear it, they will believe and be saved. Now, the next question that arose in his mind, that to whom shall I preach the doctrines first? My old teachers are dead. They would have received the good news with joy. But my 5 disciples are still alive. I shall go to them, and to them shall I first proclaim the gospel of deliverance. He described the Madhya Pantha, the middle path before them. He said, the Tathagata does not seek salvation in austerities, but for that reason you must not think that he indulges in worldly pleasures, nor does he live in abundance. The Tathagata has found the middle path. Neither abstinence from fish or flesh, nor going naked or shaving the head, not wearing matted hair, nor dressing in a rough garment, nor covering oneself with dirt, nor sacrificing to Agni, will cleanse a man who is not free from delusions. Reading the scriptures, making offerings to priests, or sacrifices to the gods, self-mortification by heat or cold, and many such penances performed for the sake of immortality, these do not cleanse the man who is not free from delusions. Anger, drunkenness, obstinacy, bigotry, deception, envy, self-praises, superciliousness, and evil intentions constitute uncleanness, not verily the eating of flesh. Let me teach you, O Bhikshus, the middle path, which keeps aloof from both extremes. By suffering, the emancipated devotee produces confusion and sickly thoughts in his mind. Mortification is not conducive even to worldly knowledge, how much less to a triumph over the senses? He who fills his lamp with water will not dispel the darkness, and he who tries to light a fire with rotten wood will fail. Mortifications are painful, vain, and profitless, and And how can anyone be free from self by leading a wretched life if he does not succeed in quenching the fires of lust? On the other hand, sensuality of all kinds is enervating. The sensual man is a slave of his passions, and pleasure seeking is degrading and vulgar. But to satisfy the necessities of life is not evil. To keep the body in good health is a duty, for otherwise we shall not be able to trim the lamp of wisdom and keep our mind strong and clear. This is the middle path, O bhikshus, that aloof from both extremes. And the Blessed One spoke kindly to his disciples, pitying them for their errors and pointing out the uselessness of their endeavors. Now the Buddha set the wheel of the most excellent law a rolling, Dharma Chakra Pravartanam. He began to preach to the 5 bhikshus, opening to them the gate of immortality and showing them the bliss of nirvana. He explains the Dharma Chakra. The spokes of the wheel are the rules of pure conduct. Justice is the uniformity of their length. Wisdom is the tire. Modesty and thoughtfulness are the hub in which the immovable axle of truth is fixed. He who recognizes the existence of suffering, its cause, its remedy, and its cessation has fathomed the Four Noble Truths. He will walk in the right path. Buddha understood the necessity of an organization, the Sangha. Having pointed out to the bhikshus, the Buddha said, "A man that stands alone, having decided to obey the truth, may be weak and slip back into his old ways. Therefore, stand you together, assist one another, and strengthen one another's efforts. Be like unto brothers, one in love, one in holiness, and one in your zeal for the truth. Go you now, O bhikshus, for the benefit of the many, for the welfare of mankind, out of compassion for the world. Preach the doctrine which is glorious in the beginning, glorious in the middle, and glorious in the end. There are beings whose eyes are scarcely covered with dust, but if the doctrine is not preached to them, they cannot attain salvation. Proclaim to them a life of holiness. They will understand the doctrine and accept it." And the gospel of the Blessed One increased from day to day, and many people came to hear him and to accept the ordination to lead thenceforth a holy life for the sake of the extinction of suffering. Many came from all corners of the society. A king came a beggar, a queen came a courtesan, a scholar came an illiterate. Buddha talked with them in their language. His advice was not dry. Just like other great preachers, his philosophy was well illustrated in his own life and the parables that he used for giving advice. Once he told the disciples a story of the sower. It is from his own life. Bharadwaja, a wealthy Brahmin farmer, was celebrating his harvest thanksgiving when the Buddha came with his alms bowl, begging for food. Some of the people paid him reverence, but the Brahman was angry and said, "O Shramana, it would be more fitting for you to go to work than to beg. I plough and sow, and having ploughed and sown, I eat. If you did likewise, you too would have something to eat." The Tathagata answered him, and said, O Brahmana, I too plough and sow, and having ploughed and sown, I eat. Do you profess to be a husbandman, a farmer? Replied the Brahman, Where then are your bullocks? Where is the seed and the plough? Buddha answered, Faith is the seed I sow. Good works are the rain that fertilizes it. Wisdom and modesty are the plough. My mind is the guiding rein. I lay hold of the handle of the law. Earnestness is the goad. I use and exertion is my draft ox. This ploughing is ploughed to destroy the weeds of illusion. The harvest it yields is the immortal fruit of nirvana, and thus all sorrow ends. Brahmana understood the meaning of Buddha's story. He poured rice milk into a golden bowl and offered it to the Buddha, saying, Let the teacher of mankind partake of the rice milk. For the Venerable Gautama ploughs a ploughing that bears the fruit of immortality. A foolish man, learning that the Buddha observed the principle of great love which commends the return of good for evil, came and abused him. The Buddha was silent, pitying this folly. When the man had finished his abuse, the Buddha asked him, saying, Son, if a man declined to accept a present made to him, to whom would it belong? And he answered, In that case, it would belong to the man who offered it. My son, thou hast railed at me, but I decline to accept thy abuse, and request thee to keep it thyself. Will it not be source of misery to thee? As the echo belongs to the sound, and the shadow to the substance, so misery will overtake the evil doer without fail. The abuser made no reply. And Buddha continued, A wicked man who reproaches a virtuous one is like one who looks up and spits at heaven. The spittle soils not the heaven, but comes back and defiles his own person. The slanderer is like one who flings dust at another when the wind is contrary. The dust does but return on him who threw it. The virtuous man cannot be hurt, and the misery that the other would inflict comes back on himself. The abuser went away ashamed, but he came again and took refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Again, on a certain day, when Buddha dwelt at Jetavana, the garden of Anathapindika, a Brahmana asked some interesting questions which the Buddha answered. It reminds us of the conversation between Yaksha and Yudhishthira in Mahabharata. The Brahmana asked Buddha, What is the sharpest sword? What is the deadliest poison? What is the fiercest fire? What is the darkest night? Buddha replied, A word spoken in wrath is the sharpest sword. Covetousness is the deadliest poison. Passion is the fiercest fire. Ignorance is the darkest night. The Brahmana asked, Who gains the greatest benefit? Who loses most? Which armor is invulnerable? What is the best weapon? Buddha replied, He is the greatest gainer who gives to others, and he loses most who greedily receives without gratitude. Patience is an invulnerable armor. Wisdom is the best weapon. The Brahman asked, "What causes ruin in the world? What breaks off friendships? What is the most violent fever? Who is the best physician?" Buddha replied, "Ignorance causes the ruin of the world. Envy and selfishness break off friendships. Hatred is the most violent fever, and the Buddha is the best physician." The Brahmana then asked and said, "Now I have only one doubt to be solved. Pray, clear it away. What is it? Fire can neither burn, nor moisture corrode, nor wind crush down, but is able to reform the whole world?" The Blessed One answered, "Blessing. Neither fire, nor moisture, nor wind can destroy the blessing of a good deed, and blessings reform the whole world." The Brahmana, having heard the words of the Blessed One, was full of exceeding joy. Clasping his hands, he bowed down before him in reverence and disappeared suddenly from the presence of the Buddha. There was a certain Brahman in Koshambi, a wrangler and well versed in the Vedas. As he found no one whom he regarded his equal in debate, he used to carry a lighted torch in his hand. And when asked for the reason of his strange conduct, he replied, "The world is so dark that I carry this torch to light it up as far as I can." A Shramana, a bhikshu, was sitting in the marketplace, heard these words, and said, "My friend, if thine eyes are blind to the sight of the omnipresent light of the day, do not call the world dark. Thy torch adds nothing to the glory of the sun, and thy intention to illumine the minds of others is as futile as it is arrogant." The Brahman asked, "Where is the sun of which thou speakest?" The Shramana replied, "The wisdom of the Tathagata is the sun of the mind. His radiancy is glorious by day and night, and he whose faith is strong will not lack light on the path to Nirvana, where he will inherit bliss everlasting." Throughout his long life, Buddha preached the gospel of compassion, self-dependence, love, and mercy. He is calling us to become a Buddha, a awakened one. Let a man overcome anger by love. Let him overcome evil by good. Let him overcome the greedy by liberality, the liar by truth. For hatred does not cease by hatred at any time. Hatred ceases by not hatred. This is an old rule. Speak the truth. Do not yield to anger. Give if thou art asked. By these 3 steps you will become divine. As the lily will grow full of sweet perfume and delight upon a heap of rubbish, thus the disciple of truly enlightened Buddha shines forth by his wisdom among those who are like rubbish, among the people that walk in darkness. Let us live happily then, not hating those who hate us. Among men who hate us, let us dwell free from hatred. Let us live happily then, free from all ailments among the ailing. Among men who are ailing, let us dwell free from ailments. Let us live happily, then free from greed among the greedy. Among men who are greedy, let us dwell free from greed. If one man conquers in battle 1,000 times 1,000 men, and if another conquer himself, he is the greatest of conquerors. The sun is bright by day, the moon shines by night, the warrior is bright in his armor, thinkers are bright in their meditation, but among all the brightest with splendor day and night is the Buddha, the awakened, the holy, blessed. Yes, bright was his birth, bright was his enlightenment, and bright was his final departure. Buddha was fallen ill after taking food from an untouchable man, Chunda. Perceiving that death was near, he called Ananda, his beloved disciple, and said, see the compassion of Buddha. He said, he told Ananda, now it may happen, Ananda, that someone should stir up remorse in Chunda, the smith, by saying, it is evil to thee, Chunda, and loss to thee that the Tathagata died, having eaten his last meal from thy provision. Any such remorse, Ananda, in Chunda, should be checked by saying, it is good to thee, Chunda, and gain to thee that the Tathagata died, having eaten his last meal from thy provision. From the very mouth of the Blessed One, O Chunda, have I heard, from his own mouth have I received this saying, these two offerings of food are of equal fruit and of much greater profit than any other. The offering of food which a Tathagata accepts when he has attained perfect enlightenment, and when he passes away by the utter passing away, in which nothing whatever of his earthly existence remained behind. These two offerings of food are of equal fruit and of equal profit, and of much greater profit, and of much greater fruit and much greater profit than any other. There has been laid up by Chunda a karma rebounding to length of life, rebounding to good birth, rebounding to good fortune, rebounding to good fame, rebounding to the inheritance of heaven and of great power. In this way, Ananda, should be checked any remorse in Chunda, the smith. He said again to Ananda, it may be, Ananda, that in some of you the thought may arise, the word of the Master is ended. We have no teacher more, but it is not thus, Ananda, that you should regard it. It is true that no more shall I receive a body, for all future sorrow is now forever passed away. But though this body will be dissolved, the Tathagata remains. The truth and the rules of the order which I have set forth and laid down for you all, let them, after I am gone, be a teacher unto you. The words of Buddha, not only mere words. In these words, Buddha resides. Meditating on his words, we can have unceasing communion with him. We can stay with them. We can live with them. We can walk with them. We can live with them. We can die with them. Let's pay our devoted salutation to Lord Buddha by some of the selected parts of Lalita Vistara. Na Brahma Loke, na cha Deva Loke, na Yaksha Gandharva Manusya Loke, Lokasya Jati Jarapaneta, Nannosti Tato hi Manusya Chandra. O moon among men, there is no one like you present in Brahma Loka, that is abode of Brahma, the creator, Deva Loka, Yaksha, Gandharva, or Manusya Loka, abode of other celestial beings, or in this world, who can eliminate all kinds of discrimination and decrepitude. Banditastwang shureish sendrai rishivishchapi pujitaha vaidya sarvasya lokasya bande ahamapi twang vibho. You have been adored by Indra and all other gods, and great sages offer their heartfelt worship to you. You are the physician of this whole world. O omnipresent, I worship you. Loke kleshagni santapte pradurbhuto maharada namastu bodhisattvaya sambuddhaya namo namaha. Ajnana timire loke pradurvhuta pradipakaha namastu bodhisattvaya sambuddhaya namo namaha. Shoka sagara kantare jnana shrishta swarupaka namastu bodhisattvaya sambuddhaya namo nama. In this world, which is burned from all type of miseries, you are like a cool lake. O Bodhisattva, O Sambuddha, I bow to you. You are like the lamp in this world full of ignorance. O Bodhisattva, O Sambuddha, I bow to you. In the sea of mourning, in the great forest of samsara, you are the best medium to cross. O Bodhisattva, O Sambuddha, I bow to you.